Next up we have another one of my favourites from last year, an album that I did review, and over time my opinion on it has, like, grown a bit. I actually love it a lot more than I did before. It is Panic at the Disco's Death of a Bachelor. I really dig this album. There's tracks on it that I don't like, songs like Victorious I don't like anymore. Hallelujah, I've kind of gone between liking and disliking, and Don't Threaten Me with a Good Time I'm kind of mixed about, but the rest of the album I think's fantastic. Even Crazy Equals Genius, which in my original review I didn't like. It kind of blends modern electronic pop music with sort of classic jazz pop like Frank Sinatra and stuff like that. There's a few elements of rock in there, especially on tracks like Golden Days. It never reaches sort of the early sounds of Panic at the Disco. It never gets back into the pop punk, emo pop sound of their early stuff, or sort of like the psychedelic pop sound of Pretty Odd or anything like that. It does kind of stand out among the rest of the albums. It's very different than the other albums, and that's kind of why I like it so much. I love the artwork on this. I actually think the fact that this isn't a coloured vinyl, it's just straight black, actually really fits the aesthetic of the album fantastically. I just love it. It sounds beautiful on vinyl. I really want to own the other albums by the band on vinyl. I know Pretty Odd and A Fever You Can't Sweat Out were coming out on vinyl, but currently Death of a Bachelor is sadly the only one I own. I really want the first two, especially Pretty Odd, which is my favourite by them, which I did do a review of. I plan to eventually review all their albums, because I've reviewed two of them, so I might as well go all out and do the others. Next up, we have a few albums from one of my favourite bands ever, who I've never really talked about on this channel, which is a shame, because I could talk quite a lot about them. It is, of course, Pink Floyd, and this is their first album, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn. I don't like this album. I hadn't actually listened to it till recently, but I gave it a chance, and I don't like it. I think it's really boring. There's tracks that I like on it, like Astronomy Domine is fantastic, one of my favourite Pink Floyd songs, but the rest of it is just so uninteresting, which is a shame because I think there's so many good elements on there, and Syd Barrett is a fantastic musician, and it's so close to actually being good, but I think it gets too caught up in being too, like, over the top and very psychedelic, and it's like very Pink, like Beatles sounding in a way. It kind of sounds a lot like sort of like what they were doing with Sgt. Pepper's and what the Beach Boys were doing with Pet Sounds and stuff. It kind of struggles to sound like its own thing, and that's really what destroys the album for me and what keeps it from being great. But we have the other albums, which are just fucking fantastic. Need I say more? The Dark Side of the Moon is one of the best albums ever made. It's commonly considered to be the best album ever made, and unlike Sgt. Pepper, I would actually agree with the people who consider this to be the best album ever made. It actually did come with a poster. This is one of my dad's original pressings. Like, all the Pink Floyd ones I've got are all my dad's original pressings, and he had a poster in there that he'd never used. So I've now got a Pink Floyd poster in my room, which came from this original vinyl, and it's so cool, and I'm just so happy I have it. This album is fantastic. It was never really my favourite Pink Floyd album, and I don't think it is still to this day, but I recently got back into it massively, and I really dig it, and it's one of my favourites. Then we have The Wall. I believe the actual, like, Pink Floyd The Wall sticker bit, I believe that used to be sticky, but it's obviously dried out over time, so it kind of, it's just a little bit of plastic that you can take out and put everywhere. Like, you could just, I don't know, it's really, like, weird rubbery stuff, but yeah, it slides about in the record for some reason. But I really dig The Wall. It's very different to anything else the band did before and have really done since, and it's just fallen down again. It shows their inspiration of sort of pop music in some elements. Tracks like Another Brick in the Wall is some of the band's most iconic and memorable songs. I would have loved to have seen the original stage performance of this. Obviously, I know Roger Waters does his own performances of it, which I do still really want to see, but it would have been great to see it back in the day with the original band. Obviously, they did the Wall, the movie, which is also really, really good. And I love the artwork and everything from this album. I actually want to get some of the like drawings and art tattooed on me sometime because it's just so cool. But yeah, I really, really like this album. It's not my favourite. My favourite Pink Floyd album is easily Wish You Were Here, which I currently do not own on vinyl for some reason. It's like, you'd think that would be one of the first ones I'd go out and get, but I've just never gotten around to it. So I think I'll get it eventually. Then we have sort of like the semi-sequel to The Wall, The Final Cut, which I've not listened to. It originally started off as like a soundtrack album for the songs that were made for the film, but weren't obviously on the album. But then it kind of like changed into this whole concept album of its own, all about the army and stuff in World War II and stuff. Or World War One, I don't know. I think it's World War Two actually. But yeah, I've heard this is one that a lot of people are mixed on. It's one that a lot of people forget about when talking about the band. They normally only talk about the early stuff leading up to Wish You Were Here. But I've never heard it. Next up, we have a compilation album by them. It's a collection of great dance songs. Has some really good songs on here. Songs like One of These Days, Money, Sheep, Shine On You Crazy Diamond, which is my fave, Wish You Were Here, and Another Brick in the Wall Part 2. It's not really much I can say about it. It's got some good songs on it. It's got some great dance songs. It's a collection of great dance songs. So this video is never gonna end. It's still going on. Momentary Lapse of Reason. Haven't heard this one either. It's one that I think, again, a lot of people were mixed on. I don't think a lot of people really like this album. But I've not listened to it. I don't know. Stop asking me. Okay, so now we have a few albums that I can just get through quickly because I've not listened to them yet. It's all by one band that I really like. I just haven't really listened to much of them yet. But I will. Eventually, I keep saying that, I'll eventually get through all these albums I have. But yeah, I know I like this band because I've heard a few of their songs and really like it. It is The Police. This is their first album, Outlandos de More. It has Roxanne on it. And then we have Regatta de Blanc, which has Message in a Bottle on it. That's the only song I know on it. Zenyatta Mondata. Is that it? Zenyatta Mondata. What kind of a fucking name is that? These guys came up with some weird names. This has Don't Stand So Close to Me on it. Also a song called Dee Do 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 Dee Da Da Da. Yeah. There's also a song called When the World Is Running Down, You Make the Best of What's Still Around. So these guys were like the original Fall Out Boy. Then they decided to stop doing stupid names with Ghost in the Machine. I don't know any of these songs, so yeah, it's an album. And then finally, Synchronicity. Which side is it? It's this side, okay. I think most people consider this to be one of the band's worst. But it's got Every Breath You Take on it, so I guess that's good. Can you tell I have such a lack of passion now? And then we get into some Queen. We have Queen 2. I don't really like Queen 2. I don't like early Queen, basically. I don't really like when they were just making like hard rock music. I don't really think it's that great. I prefer when they got into their more catchy stuff with like A Night at the Opera and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm not big into this album. Does it have, I think it's Sheer Heart Attack actually that has the ones I like on there. Yeah, it's got Seven Seas of Rye on, that's a good song. Yeah, it's got this weird gatefold that's like, it's the wrong way round, it's really annoying. Sheer Heart Attack, that's the one I was talking about. The song I was thinking of was Stone Cold Crazy, which I couldn't think of. But this has also got Brighton Rock and Killer Queen on, which are both good songs. I tried listening to this album as well, but again, I didn't really like it. I don't know why, I just don't like early Queen. I don't know what to say. Then we have Live Killers. Not a great live album. The band even admit it, it's not a great live album. It just wasn't very greatly mixed. I don't really know. It just doesn't sound great. It could have sounded great, but it just doesn't really. I also don't like the rock version of We Will Rock You, which I know a lot of people do like, but I'm not really into it. Then there's the Flash Gordon soundtrack. I've not seen Flash Gordon, actually, but the song's good, I guess. That's the only song on here I know, but the song's good, I guess. Oh, I know the Wedding March as well, so they're good. Then we have A Kind of Magic. I really like this album. I know I wasn't really big on the other albums, but no, this album's really, really good. It kind of started off as like the Highlander soundtrack, because a lot of the songs are from Highlander, which is a fucking fantastic film. Obviously, songs on here like A Kind of Magic, Don't Lose Your Head, Who Wants to Live Forever, and Princes of the Universe, and One Vision all come from it. So, yeah, this is a really, really solid album. Then we have Queen Greatest Hits. I didn't actually know my dad owned this on vinyl for a long time. I know I listened to a lot of Queen through the CD version of this he owned, but while I was going through his vinyls before I left home, and I found it. So, yeah. I don't really know what to say. It's their greatest hits. Bohemian Rhapsody, Another One Bites the Dust, Killer Queen, Fat Bottom Girls, Bicycle Race, You're My Best Friend, Don't Stop Me Now, Save Me, Crazy Little Thing Called Love, Not Somebody to Love, Now I'm Here, Good Old Fashioned Lover Boy, Play the Game, Flash, Seven Seas of Rye, We Will Rock You, and We Are the Champions all on there. Yeah, some really, really well-known songs, all really good. And then finally, the last in the Queen collection is Radio Gaga, the 12-inch single. I love Radio Gaga. It's one of my favourite Queen songs, so it's pretty cool to have this 12-inch single. I also really love their hairstyles in this. They're just so 80s and great. I haven't even got into the 7 inches yet. I mean, we've still got quite a few albums to go. So next is possibly one of my favourite albums. I know I said that a few times already, but this one is probably tied with Blink-182's self-titled album as being my favourite album ever. It is Like Clockwork by Queens of the Stone Age. I adore this album. I love Queens of the Stone Age. This is easily their best album in my opinion. I love Songs for the Deaf and Rated R also, but Like Clockwork for me is just the best. There are just fantastic songs on this album. It's a lot of the album is about Josh Homme, the lead singer, kind of facing death because he spent a lot of time in hospital. He spent like 6 months. He couldn't move after almost dying. And a lot of the songs on the album, I mean, are all about that, all about his experiences of almost dying. Kind of like 13 Voices by Sum 41, but a lot more depressing and less angry. And it's definitely a lot more different to the other Queens of the Stone Age albums. There's songs like The Vampire Time and Memory and the title track, which are pretty much just piano ballads. The only time it gets closer to the other albums is the first track, Keep Your Eyes Peeled. There's a lot of sort of blues rock influence sound, like especially with I Sat by the Ocean and Smooth Sailing. I love this album. Plus, I Appear Missing is my favourite Queens of the Stone Age song. I cannot wait for the new album. I hope it's going to be as good as this, but I kind of doubt that they're ever going to be able to top it. Also, the artwork from this is fucking fantastic also. Similar to The Wall, I want to get some of this tattooed on me because it's just beautiful. Next up, we have one of my favourite rock albums from the 90s. Not my favourite from this band, but one of them. It is the self-titled Rage Against the Machine album. My favourite is probably The Battle of Los Angeles, which I don't own on vinyl yet. This is the only one I own. But this is still a fantastic album, of course, with Killing in the Name, probably the band's most iconic song along with Bulls on Parade. They're kind of the only two a lot of people know, but they have some fantastic songs, and I definitely recommend checking this album out if you like those songs. It's just some really, really great rap metal, kind of what inspired the nu metal genre, and that's actually why the Rock Critic put them as his #1 nu metal band. Because they do have a lot of the elements that nu metal stole, especially bands like Linkin Park and Limp Bizkit and shit. But they're just not as good as Rage. Rage It easily the best in the rap metal genre in my opinion, and they're just fucking fantastic, and this album's great. But as I said, I prefer the Battle of Los Angeles. It's just much better. Next up, we have one of my favourite albums of the last few years, and these guys just announced a second album and also a UK tour, and they're coming nearby, so I'm going to have to do whatever it takes to get a ticket to that show because I want to see them. Although I did actually get early access to the pre-sale because of the because I pre-ordered their new album, so yeah, I'm excited. It is Royal Blood's debut self-titled album. Just a fantastic album. It's very similar to Queens of the Stone Age and Led Zeppelin and Muse, kind of like the very anthemic arena rock, sort of blues rock sort of sound. And what makes it even better is that it's actually, all the guitar stuff is done on one bass guitar. It's a very raw album. There's no like, not a lot of overdubs and stuff. Like they try to get a lot of it done in one take. And it all sounds fantastic. And the fact that he could like pull this shit off on one bass guitar, it's just impressive. He uses a lot of like pedals and stuff to create this huge, very fuzzy guitar sounding sound, and it's incredibly mind blowing. This album is really, really good. I just love this album. I know a lot of people love it, so there's a good reason for that, and I cannot wait for their next album, which comes out in June, and I will definitely be doing a review of it when it comes out. Next up, we have one of my favourite albums of 2016, probably my second favourite actually, and also one of my favourite colour vinyls I own. It is Jeff Rosenstock's Worry. I love Jeff Rosenstock. You may remember when I did my 2015 favourite albums video, I put We Cool on there, and I love that album so much, and I think Worry, at first, I was like, this is not great. I didn't really understand it at first. It took a few listens, and when I finally got it, I was like, holy shit, this is great. It's kind of like punk rock's answer to Abbey Road in a way. Especially since like most of the second side of the album is like one big medley of a song. And there are some fantastic songs on here. It's definitely it's kind of a mixture of being much more polished and a lot more raw than We Cool. It's not really pop punk anymore. It's definitely more punk rock. A lot of elements of ska in there, but there's like more acoustic guitars and pianos on here. It's definitely a lot more anthemic and a lot more alternative rock than We Cool. And it's just a fantastic album. I hope he carries on doing an album a year, because if he carries on, he could be doing some fucking great stuff. And Worry is just an incredible album. One of the best I think I've heard, possibly over the entire decade in my opinion. So we got another band and nearly their entire discography here. Like we got the first few albums from them up until the 80s, because that's when I actually stopped liking them. It wasn't intentional, these are like my parents' records. But until the early 80s, my parents had all their albums and then just kind of stopped. Which I completely understand, because I think they got a bit shit towards the end. And I'm kind of glad they're kind of broken up. I'm not really sure. They're not doing touring anymore, which is a shame, because I would have loved to have seen them. And I think they may be doing another album, but I'm not sure. But they basically aren't really together anymore. I'm talking about Rush. I love Rush. They're one of my favourite bands. This is their first album, not one of my favourites, but it is still really, really solid. There's tracks like Finding My Way and Working Man, which are just fantastic. They're one of the best in the progressive rock genre. It's a really good album. I wouldn't say this is a good place to start if you've never listened to them before, but if you've listened to some of their stuff and really like what you're hearing, then maybe check it out. It's not really the best, but it's good for what it is. I think as soon as Neil Peart joined later on, that's when the band kind of found themselves. And John Rutsey's a good drummer, but he just doesn't have what Neil Peart had. And yeah, he wasn't on this album, so it's just not as good. And then we have their second album, Caress of Steel. I like Caress of Steel. I know a lot of people think it's one of their worst, but I think it's decent. There's some good songs in it, like Bastille Day is pretty good. It's definitely kind of a very strange album, which I think is what puts people off. It's incredibly nerdy, like a lot of the album is very fantasy driven, which they do get into a little bit more and a lot better on things like Fly By Night, which we'll get to. But yeah, it kind of fails a little bit on this one, but I do still dig this album. And then we have Fly By Night, the first Rush album I ever listened to. I really like this album. There's just some fantastic songs on here. I think this is really where the band found themselves, and from here on out, they made some fucking fantastic stuff, which we'll get into, obviously. Tracks like Anthem, Beneath. Tracks on here that are great, songs like Anthem, Beneath, Between and Behind, Biter and the Snow Dog, Fly By Night, and of course the title track Fly By Night. They're all just fantastic songs, and I love the album artwork on here. It's just so cool. Then we get to my favourite Rush album, quite early on actually. An album that is just so influential on so many different people, 2112. I adore this album. It's in my top 10 favourites ever. It's just a fantastic album. The first side is one big song called 2112, and it has this concept and this great story that goes through it. And side 2 is not as good as side A. And side B is not as good as side A, but it's still really good. There's some fantastic songs on the second side. I honestly think the second side is, although not as good, it's still fantastic and still easily their best album. There's some fantastic songs like A Passage to Bangkok, The Twilight Zone, and Tears all on there. I love this album, everything about it. And it was also really cool when they put it into Guitar Hero Warriors of Rock, like they put the entire first side on there, like that 20-minute 2112 title track, and they kind of made it a huge part in the story of that game, and it was really cool seeing it. And they even got the band to come in and record voiceovers for it, which was just really cool. I love this album and cannot recommend it enough. And my parents also got some of their live albums. They got All the World's a Stage, which I haven't actually listened to. I've listened to Exit Stage Left, which we'll get to in a minute. But yeah, it's cool that they have the entire 2112 on here, so I'll have to listen to it because that's a pretty cool thing. It would be great hearing them do that song fully live, and they didn't really do it a lot, so yeah, it's cool. But yeah, haven't listened to it yet. I probably will eventually. Then we have A Farewell to Kings, which is probably my second favourite Rush album. It's fantastic. Xanadu is my favourite Rush song, actually. But the rest of the album's great as well, including the title track, Cinderella Man, Closer to the Heart, and also Cygnus X1, which is the first of a two-part epic song, which carries on to Hemispheres. Probably my third favourite Rush album, actually. La Villa Strangiato, also known as An Exercise in Self-Indulgence, is my second favourite Rush song. It's this fantastic 9.5-minute instrumental song with some of the best guitar work I've heard in any song, period. It's just a fantastic record. The Cygnus X1 Book 2 opening 18-minute track is fantastic. And also songs like The Trees. I say songs, there's like 3 other tracks on the album after Cygnus X1. But The Trees is a fantastic song, and also Circumstances. I love this album, and I only just realised that the main picture is of a naked man standing on a massive brain. I know it was a naked man standing on something. I didn't know it was a massive brain, but it's a naked man standing on a massive brain with a man in a suit. I don't know. Permanent Waves, the first record released in the 1980s. Spirit of Radio is actually the first song released in the 80s also. I really like this one. Spirit of Radio is one of my favourite Rush songs, but it's also got songs like Free Will and Jacob's Ladder, which it's also got songs like Free Will and Jacob's Ladder, which are great songs also. Yeah, Permanent Waves. And then we get Moving Pictures, which is probably the band's most well-known album. It's got songs like Tom Sawyer, YYZ, Limelight. They're 3 of the band's most iconic songs. And And yeah, there's a good reason why this is one of the band's most well-known albums, because it is a really, really good one. This was probably, I think it was my second Rush album I got into. But like Tom Sawyer was the first Rush song I ever heard, because it was in an episode of Futurama actually, and I remember me and my dad used to watch Futurama a lot when I was growing up, and he was a huge Rush fan, so when he heard Tom Sawyer and I was like, oh, that sounds cool, he like introduced me to the band and played me the full song, and I fell in love with them, even at a young age, and I've just grown up with them, and Moving Pictures is definitely a great place to start if you've not listened to the band and want a place to start. YYZ is one of the best instrumental rock songs ever made, in my opinion. Again, some of the best guitar work. Haven't talked about Neil Peart's drumming. He is my favourite drummer ever. He just fucking knocks out of the park on YYZ, and all the tracks on any song he plays drums on, he's just fantastic. So yeah, Moving Pictures is a great album. Then we have Exit Stage Left, which is another live album. It's a fantastic live album, actually. One of my favourite live albums ever. It really does blow me away every time I listen to it, just how great they are live. Like, they play La Villa Strangiato, which I talked about earlier, the long instrumental song. And they play it so precisely, you could like, it could almost be a studio recording, but obviously there's a full, like, there was a DVD or VHS back in the day of the live performance that they used for the album also, and it showed them actually playing it, and I just cannot believe that human beings are capable of playing music like this. Like, a lot of people consider their music to be kind of cheesy and not great, but their technical playing is just so incredible. Every single one of them is just a fantastic musician, except for maybe Geddy Lee's vocals. They're not great, but he's a great bassist. Alex Lifeson is one of, if not my favourite guitarist ever. Neil Peart, obviously, I said, is my favourite drummer. They're just a fantastic band, and this really shows it off. If they ever do a live tour ever again, which I think is highly unlikely, as Alex Lifeson has arthritis now, and they've said that they're not going to do a tour again. But if they ever come to the UK and do a performance again, I will do whatever it takes to get there, because I just want to see him live so badly. So this is kind of the point where Rush for me kind of went downhill. They started making more electronic, new wave inspired 80s pop music. Starting with Signals. I don't know if I've actually listened to this album. It's got the song Subdivisions on it, which is really good. I believe that it's got the song Subdivisions on it, which is really good, which I believe Ninja Sex Party actually did a cover of. I may be wrong. I know they did a cover of one of the songs on their later 80s stuff, but I think it may have been Subdivisions. But yeah, it's a good song. I can't remember this album. Don't know if I've even listened to it, so yeah. And then we only have 3 left in the Rush album, so I'll just quickly go through them because I haven't actually listened to them. First is Grace Under Pressure. I love the album artwork on here. It's just fucking beautiful. I've just not listened to the album yet. That was just me knocking a glass. Next we have Power Windows. Again, fantastic album cover. Not listened to it. And finally, Hold Your Fire. Shit album cover. I've heard Time Stand Still, which I love. It's one of my favourite cheesy 80s pop songs, which is weird seeing as this band are like incredibly hard, like progressive rock. Yeah, as I said, they went into making cheesy new wave 80s pop sounds. Hold Your Fire has, as I said, Time Stand Still. I think it's got a couple of songs I've heard as well, but Time Stand Still is the only one I remember. And it is really good for what it is. As I said, I just don't really like their 80s stuff apart from that song, so maybe I'll give it another try and it will grow on me. I know I don't like their 90s or 2000s stuff at all. I tried Vapor Trails and I tried Clockwork Angels, which I didn't really like. I also listened to the song Roll Your Bones, which is fucking awful. I think it's Roll Your Bones or maybe Roll the Bones, but it like has this rap where they pitch shifted Geddy Lee's vocals to make him sound black. That's not even a joke, that's an actual song. It's just so awful. But yeah, that's my Rush discography, I believe. There may be another one in there. No, that's it. I promise the next part will be the last, so yeah.
I ain't the sharpest tool in